Hey, hello everyone, and welcome to dotnetgurukul.com. Today is the sixth session of SQL Server. So, in this particular session, we will learn how to install SQL Server 2022 database, and we will also see what is different installation types we have, editions, versions, and we'll see what is named under default namespace, and we'll also see the authentication types. So on this installation, we need to know the basic about what is client and what is server. And later we know some of the installation types and instance types and authentication types. So later, once we install, we will go explore some of the SQL Server components, like mainly into the database engine and SQL client, SSMS, nothing but the SQL Server Management Studio. And also we have the SQL Server tools like Profiler, so performance tuning and monitoring, etc. So this is basically the introduction of installation of SQL Server, knowing the different types of installation types and knowing the different components at the servers that are available. Okay, so let's get started. So SQL, before going to directly jumping into the installation, we have to know what is SQL client and SQL server is. So generally in installation, like we go to the particular download center and we download from the Microsoft and we take the exe file and run the exe and look into the setup wizard and we select the options and we install the SQL server, right? But before that, we have to know few things, like there is something like request and the response and the client and the server. So I will go through, connect to my tablet, and I will discuss in much detail about this SQL client and SQL server. So basically, like SQL client server works with the request and the response. So when there is a request from the client, and the server will process the request and it will revert back the response. Okay. So I connect to the tablet now. Okay. So let us get started with the things. To know before installation. Okay. Let's get started with the main things that we have to know before installation. So nothing, I told, like there will be client and the server, and the server will process the response based on the request. Okay. I have this server here, SQL server, which is nothing but the database engine. Okay. And I have the different clients. Okay. Let's say I call this as client 1 and this is the client 2. So whatever the box changes. Okay. Request, response, request, response. So now we see that there are several machines. Let's say different clients, client N. So n number of clients that can connect to the server and process the request and send back the response. So in this particular client and the server, there is a specific softwares for both. Like for a client to make a request, we need a particular software, and for a SQL server to give the response back, we need a specific software. So what is the software that has to be installed at the client is nothing but the SSMS, which is nothing but the SQL Server Management Studio. And what software we require at the server? Nothing but the SQL Server. So we have something like SSMS .exe file where we can get it from the Microsoft Download Center, and here we will have the SQL Server 2022 some Express edition, like I tell you on the editions .exe. So when you run this exe files, so you'll get the client installed for SSM exe, and when you install this exe, you will have the SQL Server installed on your machine. So basically, like here we have Express Edition exe, like we have different editions over at the server. You can have the Enterprise Edition. You can have the Standard Edition. You can have the Express Edition, Developer Edition. So basically, I'm giving you some idea on the editions also. Enterprise Edition is basically for large businesses, like large enterprise data. Enterprise generally, these large enterprise editions require license to purchase, and once the subscription key is given to the end user, then they will install this Enterprise Edition. Standard Edition is for medium business, medium scale businesses, and this also needs some licensing part. Express Edition is for small business, and it is free. So now that we are working with the Express, we are going to work with the Express Edition because we are for practice, right? And Developer Edition is for developer activities, development activities, and not for production. So this is for development only and not for the production. Like these are the basic editions that we have at the SQL Server. Okay. Now that you understand like basic about the client and the server, and some basic about the editions, this all comes under the editions. So now our interest will be the Express Edition. So generally we have seen that we need a software which is called SSMS to interact with the database. That is nothing but SSMS. Generally the client machines will be either Windows 10 or 11. Okay, this can be a basic like Windows 10 or 11, and when it comes to a server, it can be like Windows Server. Okay, Windows server, like this is the operating systems. So operating systems, like generally the operating systems of client and servers will vary, and here are these things. When we are working on the client machines, like we'll call them as generally called as the database developer role. There are important two roles in this particular thing. Like the team who are working at the client side is nothing but we'll call them as the database developer role, and who is working on the server side, we'll call them as the database administrator. Okay. So in the developer, like the roles and the responsibility of the developer is like to design the database, query the database, fine tune, performance tune, or monitoring their activity. Okay. Activity log. So basically, like developer role is to design the database, like he can create through SMS, he can create a database onto the SQL server, nothing but on the database engine. So he can do some CRUD operations. Okay, he can create a database, and he can do read, update, delete the data on the server. So basically through the client machine, he can interact to the server machine, and he can create the database. I can read the database and delete the database through as the developer role through SSMS. Okay. So this is basically the basic developer role. So let comes to the admin roles. Admin roles is for installation, the software, for generally like backup, recovery, security, and let's say monitoring, let's say like maintenance. So these are the admin level roles. Like he can install, and he can monitor the database, the number of clients that it's coming. He can have the what you call the develop the application to plan the capacity. Let's say there are n number of users. Let's say there are 10,000 requests, 10,000 users. He will be looking into the capacity, like how many thread pools are there for that particular from different clients, and he will monitor. and he will give the security in terms of permit, give the actions like in terms of permissions, in terms of revert and reworking back the permissions, like, and the maintenance part as well. So this is the basic roles of developer role and the admin role. So when you install this SQL Server, like we will come with some uh, components and tools. Let's see what those components and tools. So we will have SQL Server components. Let's say I have the database engine. So once you have the SQL Server installed, you'll get a database engine. You will have SSAS, SSRS, SSAS, and you have the SQL Server agent. So these are the basic components of the SQL Server components, and we have some tools also like performance tuning, and we have the activity monitoring, activity logs. So basically, like, we have certain set of components, like database engine is for creating the databases and reading and updating the database. Like it manages your total data in terms of tables, and that is nothing but the database engine. SSIS, SSRS, SSIS is nothing but the when we can have the integration services, like it is called the ETL process, like where we can read the data from multiple data sources and in through the form of SSIS packages, and we can integrate the extract the data, and we can process the data, and we can project the meaningful data through SSRS as well. And SSRS is nothing but the reporting services, like where we project the data in the meaningful formats, and analysis services are nothing but we analyze the data. So that's the basics about the SSIS and SSAS all about. Now let I get into the installation process. SQL Server installation process. So now that we know that there is a client and there is a server and there is a request and the response, I will draw the picture once again. So here is the client and here is the server. So when there is a request and from this particular client, how do we want it to connect to this particular system? So there is a particular way that we can connect the client to the server, which is nothing but the instance through a particular instance, and that instance can be a default instance or a named instance. Nothing but when there is a request from this particular client to the server, we need a particular instance to be generated to connect to that particular server, right? So we have the default instance and named instances. I will go through that in detail, but try to know that there will be instances like default instance and named instance to connect to the database. And also, like, we have the authentications. Let's say I wanted to have a Windows authentication, I can have the Windows authentication, or I can have the SQL Server authentication. So basically, like, as a part of Windows authentication, as an anonymous user, I just wanted to enter into the particular SQL Server, like a Windows authentication, like I can give the Windows authentication, or I can have the username and the password to be imposed based on the request to connect to the server. I'll go for the SQL Server authentication. So there are two types of authentications are there: Windows authentication and SQL Server authentication. And for instance, also, like, we have the default and named instances. Okay. We also have installation types. So what is the installation types? We have basic, we have custom, we have download, media. Basic authentication is like which it will takes all the values to be default through the basic authentication. Basic and custom authentications required internet connection. So when you run the exe, like it will get all the packages from the from the Microsoft website, and which needs the connection to the internet, and it fetches all the packages from the internet, and it installs in your system. So nothing but I need to have the default instance. So when you select the basic instance, it will take the default instance, and it will take the Windows authentication. Okay. So nothing but like, and all the way of connecting to the server from the client, it will take all the default values, and there will be no SSIS or no SSRS, SSAS. These components are not there. We'll have only the database engine. When you select the basic type, you'll have only the database engine, no SSIS, no SSNS, no SSAS, and it will have the default instances, and the Windows authentication as the default authentication types. When you select custom as the installation type, you can choose whichever the components you want. You can choose the whichever the instance you want, and you can choose the whichever the authentication types you wanted. So you can choose like named instance or default instance. You can choose for SQL Server authentication, and you choose whichever the components you want, SSIS, SSRS, or which is SQL Server agent. This is custom is nothing but choosing components. Whichever the components you wanted, you can choose. Now coming to the download media. Download media is like you download the total package from the internet, and once it is downloaded, and during installation we not internet is not required. Okay, because we already downloaded the software, and this particular copy of the software will be available on your local system. So now that I run the exe, that all the packages will be taken from your local system and installed on your machine. Okay, that's it. So this is the basic about the different types. Now has a particular basic installation of Express Edition. So now that we are going with Express Edition with a default, with a basic authentication. Now what we'll get generally? So we'll get default instance and Windows authentication and database engine. So we will not get no SSIS, SSRS, SSAS. Okay, this is the basic Express. When you install Express Edition with basic authentication type, when you install Express Edition with basic authentication type, we will get only the default instance, Windows authentication, database engine, and no SSIS, SSRS, and SSAS. So this is the basic complete picture of things that we have to know before installation, and the installation process, and instance types, and authentication types, and installation types as well. So we have seen the basic we have seen the basic what components are going to come for Express Edition and for basic authentication installation types. Okay, and also like we know what is client and the server. Like we have discussed about the developer role and the administration role, and we have seen the different components and tools that comes with this particular installation. Now let's install this software, SQL Server, and also the SSMS. Like we need to work with two softwares, right? One software is for SQL Server, which is nothing but the database engine, which gives the capability to create a new databases. So through SMS, we will interact to this particular SQL Server, and we try to create the few of the databases also. Okay, now let's get started. So I will go to now our things will come in terms of the downloading this particular setup file and running the wizard, and that is very, very simple as well. Okay, if I go to SQL Server installations, I go to the Microsoft website, and I search the Express Edition. See here, the Express Edition is a fully free edition for SQL Server, idea for development and production for desktop, web, and small server applications. This is for small server application, and this is for free edition. So now I can download this. So now I'm seeing this particular exe file, like, okay, 2003 SQL Server Express Edition. Now I told like this is the exe file, okay, SQL Server 2022 Express Edition .exe file. Now that we got the exe application file, and I'm running this application file. So click yes. Now you see the wizard runs, and now we need to go through the authentication type as the basic type. Okay, I'm going with the basic, and I'm accepting this. This is the installation folder. Either you can put it as default, or you can browse your own folder path. I'm just selecting my default path. I'm saying install. So it takes, so it's getting downloading the installed package from the Microsoft side. Now you see. So basically we have chosen the basic authentication types, and we know that basic authentication types will have the default in instances, and it has the Windows authentication, and it can have the database engine as well, but no SSIS, SSRS, and SSAS packages, since we have gone through the basic authentication. If you are choosing the custom edition, then that could have been different. Like you can have your own components, your own set of instance types, serves, authentication types, and components, whatever, in the custom types. Okay. So this is getting installed. See the download successfully done. It's getting installed. It will take a while. So meanwhile, I just want to tell you, like, be familiar with this all that has been explained. This will help, like, in terms of many things, what is required, and where we are, or how do we are communicating to the server, what we actually doing is very important. Not just opening the exe file, running the wizard, and selecting the required options. That's very easy, but we have to know exactly what we are doing in this particular way of processing the installing the SQL Server. Let me wait for a while. Okay, now installation has done successfully. Here is the instance name, and here is the SQL administrators feature installed. You can have in this instance, like, you have the connection string where you can connect from your .NET application or Java application. Here it will be a connection string, and the SQL Server install log folder, like whatever the operations on this particular database engine, everything is logged under this log folder. The transaction. So SQL engine is the media folder. You will have the media folder and the version and the source folder over here as well. So here we can see the installation has been completed successfully, and when you click on connect now, you will see one row affected. When it say one row affected, now that SQL Server Express Edition is successfully installed, and we can install now the SSMS. So now we have installed the SQL Server. Now we are installing the SSMS, which is nothing but the tool for the SQL Server client, where we can connect to the SQL Server and work with the databases. This is getting downloaded. Now I have the SSMS. I'm running the exe file. Okay, here you have the location for the installation location folder. I can, and yes, it's getting installed. Now you see the setup completed. Specific components has been installed successfully. Now I can close this. I can also close the server installation wizard. You want to exit? Yes, I can. Okay. Now let's see. Let I open the SQL Server Management Studio and explore the tools and components. Okay. First, let I see how do I connect. So I'm connecting to the database engine through the instance, like with the server name with respect to my computer name. Server name is my computer name. Let I show you. See, laptop 4KB CJS7 is my computer name. So with the computer name, taking this and authentications as the Windows. Okay, I'm connecting to this. I'm just saying that inscription mandatory. So okay, so say connect. Now see, now that we are connecting to the SQL Server. Now we got it connected to the SQL Server, and you can see some of the databases. Okay. Now the security, login, credentials, and we can see the server objects. Nothing but we installed. I will show you again here. What we have doing, like we install the SQL Server first, and now SQL Server Management Studio, and we are able to see the objects, all the objects present in the SQL Server. Okay, you understand this one, right? So I told, like we do not have this particular SQL Server authentication in basic type, and we connected to Windows authentication, and we also have the default instance, and we connected to default instance. And if let's say if I let me show this. Okay, it's still loading. Okay, leave it. So I could see the server components here, and let's say I wanted to disconnect and I wanted to connect to the analysis services. So I do not have the functionality to connect to the analysis services. See, I will not have anything on the analysis services because we do not go for analysis services or SSIS or SSRS as a part of custom installation type. Okay, this is the basic installation type, and we didn't install anything. So we can connect to the only to the database engine. So just for check, I want to create a database on the SQL Server using Management Studio. So just I can have this syntax create database name as first demo DB. See, my first database got created. Use database. I'm able to see the database. First demo DB. Okay. This is how it is. So in this session, like we have seen all the different data installation types, editions, versions, named instances, and default instances, authentication types. And we have seen some of the components and the tools. So in the tools, like we can see this SQL Server Profiler, fine-tune advisors. Okay, these are some of the tools we have seen. And finally, we have created some of the database, just a sample database, and we will go much work on this further session. So Next session will be we'll be working towards the SQL Server 2022. So we have installed, we'll be working with SQL Server 2022, like where we'll go from beginning from SQL Server 2022 data types, key constraints, and we start somehow developing few objects and querying the databases as well. So let's get started and let's get a meet up in the next session. Thank you for watching. Thank you.